Hi, everybody. We're going to get started in about just a minute. All right, I think we're going to begin. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Nappel. I'm the Executive Director of Jewish Family and Children's Services of Greater Mercer County. We appreciate you taking the time to join with us this afternoon for our webinar chat series, #Don'tGetTooClose, What We Learn and How We Grow. Our agency continues to be here to serve the community during these challenging times by adapting our services to meet your needs. We're so proud to be able to share the professional insight of our licensed counselors. And this afternoon, we are going to listen to Andrea Gaynor. Andrea Gaynor is an LCSW. Andrea is part of our senior services team as a geriatric care manager. While her recent experience is with older adults, as a licensed clinical social worker, Andrea has years of experience in supporting individuals and helping them navigate during difficult times. She's looking forward to sharing a different light on the obstacles we are all facing during COVID-19 and wants to foster positive discussion about what we are learning about ourselves and the lessons we can take with us. Before I turn the presentation over to Andrea, please know questions and comments can be submitted in the Q&A or chat box at any time and will be addressed during this presentation. Andrea, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. So the topic that I'm dealing with, the title is Don't Get Too Close, and as we know, that has been the mandate by which we've had to abide for the last 4 or 5 weeks. What I'd like to do is sort of turn it on its head a little bit and try to address the challenges that we're facing in light of this in a more positive way. And I will provide you with some strategies in order to do that. So let's just talk about, bring some of these challenges to the forefront in the beginning of this presentation. I see it as an overarching sense of loss in what we're experiencing at this time. There's a loss of freedom. We no longer have the autonomy that we had. Going to the grocery store is, at least for me, I find it to be a very tense experience as I see other people in there. There's no more socializing and taking your time picking things out. It's just going and just running home and trying to feel safe again. And that applies to many things. There's no concerts, there's no sporting events, there's lots of things that we love to do that is no longer available to us. Maybe a sense of loss of hope. We had vacation plans. People have children's weddings plans. We don't know what's going to happen. There's no real sense from anyone in terms of when life might return to what we know as normal. A loss of community, our faith communities, our friends. We can only talk to them by phone or video chat. We can't go and have coffee with them or meet them for lunch or dinner. Some people are mourning the loss of volunteering. If they are immunocompromised or they're at great risk, they are afraid to volunteer at this time. Loss of medical care. So I think most of us are clear about if we were, God forbid, diagnosed with COVID, we kind of know the drill at this point in terms of calling your doctor and testing. But what about things like physical therapy? Or suppose you just don't feel well and it's not COVID. Will you have access to your doctor? Suppose you have to go into the hospital for something that's not COVID related. One of our members broke her foot about a week ago, and she and her husband didn't know what to do. Do they have surgery? Because the hospitals now are dangerous places. She ended up having surgery, but she needed rehab. And that too is in a nursing home. It's frightening to people. Food and supplies. We want to meet our nutritional needs. If your pantry is stocked with cans of soup high in sodium, that's not really going to meet your nutritional needs. You need fresh greens and fruits and so forth, and that's not so easy to come by. And of course, there's the financial loss. It might be through a job. It might be your investments, the stock market. You had a sense of security maybe 2 months ago, and now not so much. So let's talk about some strategies and how we might be able to make them actionable. So it's good to identify and acknowledge whatever your stressors are. By labeling your stress, by giving it a name, you move the neural activity from the amygdala to the center of emotion, and which is the center of emotion and fear, to the prefrontal cortex. That part of the brain is responsible for executive function and planning. So actually, by just saying them out loud and acknowledging them, you might be able to make a slight change in the brain and how you may adapt to some or be open to some changes in your mind. By saying them, speaking in the third person to yourself, you may want to do this privately because people might think it's strange, but it's supposed to work according to the research. What that does is it creates a psychological distance, and there's some objectivity. We all know what social distancing is, but psychological distancing is standing apart from yourself as though you were helping a friend with this. So it creates that objectivity. You're somewhat removed from it, and it might seem more like you're helping a friend if you state that Andrea is very worried about having enough food in her refrigerator. And what would you do to help Andrea? How would you help her problem solve that? So that's what psychological distancing can do. And it's also good to revisit the most difficult thing you have ever been through in your life. We all know what that might look like to us. What internal and external resources helped you at that time? Was there someone or were there people who really helped you process it? What did you do within yourself? What kind of faith practices did you use? Was it meditation? Was it worship? Was it prayer? What was it that helped you get through that difficult time? And these are the techniques that you may want to apply in this situation. It's also important to find a sense of meaning and purpose in that we are much, much more limited now in terms of what we can do. Of course, first and foremost, it's important to take care of yourself. Before you can take care of anyone else, you have to take care of yourself. Keeping a routine is important. People are sort of getting into this loosey-goosey kind of lifestyle, but it is important to keep some kind of a routine. Considering otherness, doing things for others can create a mood boost. And as I mentioned before, volunteerism is important. Not everyone can go out boots on the ground and deliver food or make home visits, and most of it is not even recommended at this time. But there are organizations that have arranged for volunteers to call shut-ins, just to chat with them, just to provide some emotional support to them at this time, and it can give you a sense of purpose. Nurturing your relationships. Many relationships have been enhanced during this period of time. Some have people living with them that they didn't before, and it certainly changes the relationship. Some grandparents that I know are reading to their grandchildren on FaceTime at night. They're going through books with them. They're experiencing their relationship in a very different way, and I suspect that's something that the children will remember many years from now. Focusing on gratitude. We're all annoyed by all of these inconveniences, but I think it's important to stop yourself and say, is this an inconvenience or is this a serious problem that we're facing right now? Most of it is inconvenient. I hope that you're not facing a serious problem. But I think that we have to sometimes stop ourselves from spiraling and catastrophizing and just bring ourselves in and try to problem solve. And this is a very personal thing because I love to garden, but a victory garden is something that became very popular around World War II in both the UK and the United States when there were concerns about supplies and so forth. It provides less reliance on purchasing things. It gives you a purpose to tend the garden. You can share it with friends. You can watch it grow every day. It's just as easy as I was in the store the other day and there are tomato plants and pepper plants, taking a little patch of yard if you have it, and just growing some things. And that can be psychologically extremely beneficial. And it's good to look at what we have learned about ourselves so far. Looking at relationships that we have fostered during this time. Some people are closer with neighbors than they've ever been because they find that they're collaborating on shopping together and helping one another. Adaptations. How have you adapted to this? How do you think you could do a better job of adapting to it? And resilience. Older adults have already been through many, many things in their lives. They have demonstrated resilience. This goes back to what is the most difficult thing that you've been through? How did you get through it? How can you apply that now to stay resilient, to stay nimble during this very difficult time? And spend some time thinking, what might we have learned about ourselves with this when this crisis has ended? What will we know about ourselves or realize about ourselves that we didn't know before? So that's the thrust of what I wanted to communicate to you. I think Beth Dempsey is going to put up some resources that I found helpful in this process that I used for the research for this. And I'm happy to take some questions right now.
Does anybody have any questions for Andrea? Nobody? Come on, don't be shy. All right, well, if nobody has any questions, please remember that you can always ask us questions once again. We're here for you to help no matter what.
Oh, wait, there is something, Michelle.
Oh, we do have a question. Do you have any other ways to regulate the amygdala?
The amygdala?
Yes, that's what it is. Thank you.
So it's about acknowledging, going back to it, and actually you can go back to the research on that is at the Stanford Mind and Body Lab. Alia, Crum and Kari Leibowitz did work on stress relating to the amygdala. It is the center of emotion and fear. So if you are already a person who is an anxious person, you may notice that it's like a free-floating anxiety. There's a trigger and it goes right to the amygdala, and that's what creates that fear and flight sensation. By talking about, that's why talk therapy is important, and Michelle will talk about counseling that's available through JFCS if that's something that, if you're really suffering with the anxiety. But labeling your stress, identifying it, and that can change it to go to the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which I mentioned is responsible for the executive function and planning.
So there's a follow-up to that question. She's asking, because so many people prefer to avoid, scared to face it, scared the fear will go into the abyss. Is there a link to the study that was just mentioned that you could share?
There is, if you Google Alia, on the resources here, Alia Crum and Kari Leibowitz, Stanford Mind and Body Lab, and the web address is there, you will find research on the amygdala. Alternately, please email, and I'm happy to send you the resources that I have.
The next question is,
Sure.
what advice do you have for working parents trying to balance so many competing needs?
So I think the best thing to do is to try to keep a routine with, if you have a whiteboard or a blackboard in your house, to try to schedule tasks so everything is timed out and the children understand the boundaries around which you are trying to do that, and respect the boundaries. If mom and dad have to work between 9 and 10 a.m. every day, the kids need to have an activity between 9 and 10. And I also think it's important to have a little admin meeting every night to talk about how the day went, what worked, what didn't work, and what they might try tomorrow. But this is undoubtedly a tremendous responsibility for the parents now to juggle all of this. And I think, look, I don't want to contradict anything that's coming from the teachers, but I think we all have to be realistic about the workload and trying to balance everything out. So you may want to try to manage it. You may want to be in touch with the teacher if you feel that it's too much, to see if it can be scaled down and you can just really teach the kids the essence of what they're trying to convey to them.
So I think that kind of answers a question that somebody had about how important do you think all the online schoolwork is for the kids? And if it's stressing the kids and the parents out, what do you suggest? So I think that contacting a teacher is a good idea. But then there's another question about, what if your children are too young to stick to a schedule?
So I think that I don't know, if it's a single parent home, it's a very different situation than if there's two adults in the home, and you may have to do your work when the kids are asleep to get your work done. Because if the kids are running wild and you're a single parent and you're trying to manage them, it's not going to work. So you may want to put them in a safe place. You can keep an eye on them, give them projects to do so you can do some of the work. Otherwise, you'll have to be working when they're sleeping. If they go to bed at 9, you may need to work from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Okay. So we have another comment about, I don't know if you have any experience in talking with teachers, but do you think that the teachers are actually going to listen when they say to let the kids' schoolwork go?
I think that depends. It depends on the child. The teacher by this time of the year should know the child pretty well, what their strengths are, ways in which they need to compensate if there's some areas that are, need some work, and maybe you need to just customize it more. This is probably the work that they're sending is very general. Maybe there's just something that you could work on with the child, where they need the most help, and just scale it down that way.
So we have one comment that somebody said that they were glad that you mentioned Victory Garden, and she wants to know if she's the only one old enough to remember them.
And I know who that commenter is. Yeah, it really, there's something about it that, I don't know, I just like the whole idea of it. And as I said, it's a personal thing and it's a bias for me. But I think that's something, if we can look at, and I think this is really important too, identifying one small thing that you can do differently to establish a new pathway. And, we talk about the brain, learning new skills. It opens up neurons in the brain. And it feels good. So if you've never gardened before, I'm not saying you have to garden. Maybe you want to paint. Maybe you want to do something. But do one thing differently. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. and expecting a new outcome, change one thing that you do and try to establish a new pathway and see where it takes you. Because if you're really struggling, whatever you're doing is probably not working for you. Some of it might be, some of it may not. So just try, and most people that I work with in my practice, they say they can do that. If I say just one small thing, do it differently tomorrow. Think about this in the next hour after this ends. What can I do? One little thing can I change in order to maybe create a better pathway?
Thanks, Andrea.
You're welcome. Are we done with questions?
I do believe that we're done with questions, but if you have any additional questions, anybody out there, or you're looking for more one-on-one support, please know that JFCS now has drop-in hours every weekday. You're welcome to call during these hours to connect with a counselor for 30-minute support session. Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., and Tuesdays and Thursdays, 5 to 7 p.m. Call us at 609-987-8100 and dial 0 to be connected. We will be continuing to offer community webinars. The next one is scheduled for Thursday, April 23rd, and it's for teens dealing with loss and missed experiences, proms, sporting events, concerts, and more. And it'll be hosted by Julie Bond. At JFCS, we're all about help, hope, and healing. We are committed to helping in any way we can with counseling, food pantry and delivery, and senior services. We know hope is needed more now than ever, and we want to be a light of hope with these webinars and resources for our entire community. And we understand that the healing process will be ongoing long after we had weathered this storm, and JFCS will be there at every phase. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.